Hello, everyone, and welcome to our second day of MEI's 2023 Climate Week. We kicked off yesterday with a great panel on water management and environmental sustainability, and we have an even more exciting panel today focusing on youth activism and climate engagement. And we have really assembled an excellent set of panelists to delve into this topic, all of them in their own right, very much progressive and active in the climate arena in their own way and contributing towards that. So very excited to hear that conversation. So let me not waste any more time so we can get to the topics. I'd like to introduce our moderator for the panel today, who is Nishad Shafi. Nishad is a non-resident scholar of MEI's Climate and Water Program. He's a co-founder and executive director of the Arab Youth Climate Movement Qatar. He's a registered independent nonprofit environmental. It is a registered and independent nonprofit environmental association, Qatar. He's also an active civil society member from the Gulf and has been a prominent presence at international climate summits, especially the UNFCCC's climate summit since 2015, the COP meetings. He's also been an agenda contributor for the World Economic Forum and a TEDx speaker. And his environmental advocacy work centers around bringing policy solutions to civil society and youth climate priorities. So with that, I'll hand it off to Nishad, who will introduce our other esteemed panelists and get us going on our topic today.
Thank you, Mohammed, for that brief introduction. I'm more than happy to lead this wonderful panel with my very esteemed friends and colleagues from the climate and youth movement from the region, from different capacities, but contributing youth as the heart of their contributions to climate policy, climate solutions, climate activism. So without much ado, I would love to introduce my three panelists, starting with Atra Kamis. She's a non-resident scholar with the Climate and Water Program at the Middle East Institute. Her expertise includes climate change scenarios, atmospheric composition, water resource analysis, environmental ecosystem and sustainability. She took part in different sustainable communities and is also a member of United People Group and Future Sustainability Leader Program at Masdar City at the International Renewable Energy Agency Youth Forum in UAE, which is ARENA. She has been also worked as a research assistant at the University of Sharjah, focusing on research work on effects of climate change on drought, using temperature and precipitation methodological indices to assess drought and its propagating effects to urge policy development. Welcome, Atra, to this panel. I next move on to Sarah and my good friend to introduce her. So Sarah is the co-founder of Saudi Youth Climate Network, a youth coalition to support youth climate action in Saudi Arabia. Sarah is a pioneering Saudi young professional in clean energy sector and climate advocate committed to a career in climate action. She works as an executive business development manager at Aqua Power, successfully developing project finance sustainable utilities infrastructure projects, including solar energy, multi-utilities, and green hydrogen, contributing abating more than 3 million tons of CO2 per year for 25 years. Sarah was also elected as Emerging Climate Leaders Fellow by Yale University in 2022 and named as Saudi Arabia's Climate Ambassador in 2021 by World Bank Youth Initiative. She is one of the first female engineers from Saudi Arabia. Welcome, Sarah, to this wonderful panel today. And last but not the least, I have Michael Fern. Michael Fern is a Lebanese water resource and environmental engineer based in the Netherlands. He holds MSc in water science and engineering in IHE Delft, as well as a Master of Civil and Environmental Engineering, a Master of Oil and Gas, and a Master in Water Science from St. Joseph University of Beirut. Michael's main area of expertise is groundwater management and modeling, and he is currently working as a consultant for several projects in the Mediterranean region. I wouldn't have asked for any better panelists to address this session on youth activism and climate engagement. Let me start with why the future of youth activism and climate engagement in MENA region is promising. Obviously, the examples that I have you guys here, this is a good example to showcase how it has been progressive. Let me start from Sarah. Sarah, you have been you've been a climate advocate and an activist in own way from the Arab Gulf region. What is your perception about representation of youth climate advocates from the region, especially focusing on the Gulf?
Thank you, Nishad, and thank you, MEI, for having me today. So I think we've noticed that globally youth are agent of change when it comes to the climate conversation and across different sections of the societies. Youth are not left behind. They're being heard now more than ever, and they're demanding the right to participate fully in the climate change conversation, and especially in the public policy space. See, if we want to talk about the MENA region, we have to first understand the reality of the MENA region. We've been facing a set of economic, political, and social issues where the public leaders and the public policy makers have more priorities other than climate change to address that are pressing and that are at the moment more important for economic growth, solving the political unrest. That's from an angle. Another angle when it comes to us as youth advocates in the MENA region, there are limitations when it comes to civil liberties. There are governance realities that limit MENA region youth to have a huge impact when it comes to achieving a fair, transparent, and representative inclusion of youth in the discussions around climate. But it doesn't mean that it's not there. Although there are so many obstacles and limitations, there is still a very prominent voices of youth from the MENA region that is trying to make change, that is trying to make sure that we are heard and our priorities as young people from this region is represented and is part of the conversation.
Well put, Sarah. I'll take this question to Atra also. Atra, how do you see, representation of youth in climate activism from, youth activism from the community or youth working with a specific policy with any institution? It can be a government or it can be a non-profit think tank. So how do you see young people from the MENA region in their representation in the whole of this climate activism movement?
First of all, thank you, Nishad, for the really nice introduction, and thank you for having me today here. So MENA region is a home of some of the hottest climate in the world, and that makes the region particularly vulnerable to climate change related to extreme events. And as a response, we do see young people in the region waking up to existing threats of climate crisis. So we do see increased efforts responding to it through climate activism. Today, I believe that we have the best representation of youth in climate activism we ever had. Youth are mobilizing the raising climate change awareness with bold statements, urge to urgent action to address climate change. Efforts are growing, voices are getting louder, but still we do have a room to grow bigger and have more comprehensive representation and inclusion of youth in the different nations and different sectors. Not only in advocacy, but also in leading positions and roles that enable us to lead the climate action, make decisions, as youth are the most at stake when it comes to climate change. This is what we are anticipating really to see more of in the coming years.
Well, I wouldn't ask better than that. So that shows that there is a progress in what youth representation from the region. I will turn on to Michael with the same question. Michael, how do you see from your professional capacity or as an individual capacity or being part of other institution, how have you seen the MENA youth representation in terms of their advocacy activism, either through, like I mentioned, through their involvement with the think tanks, with the research, with government policies working? How do you see as an individual working on specific research?
Yes, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here today. So I guess I'm in a good position to answer a question since I'm at the interface between research, policy, advocacy, and all those stuff, like between my work, between my volunteering, etc. So I have the chance to meet several young people working on research related to climate change, or on advocacy related to climate change, or even on professional projects related to climate change. So it's very important to invest nowadays in strong social and environmental awareness that our generation is possessing towards climate-related.
I think there's some technical glitch with Michael's connection. I'm going to wait for a couple of seconds and then I move back to you, Sarah. Michael, do you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear. Sorry, we
Yeah.
have some technical issues, but that's part of the adaptation. So I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, technological adaptation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can continue, Michael.
Okay, so I was saying that our generation being the social media generation, so we have to benefit from the level of awareness we might be gaining, or our generation, the public in general, is gaining out of this technical development. But we have also to be very aware that this also has a lot of drawbacks that we might be exposed to. So we have to be aware of fake news and all those stuff. So if we look at the Arab region, for example, I have some statistics that I already prepared for a previous talk. So people aged between 15 and 29, they constitute about 30% of the population in the MENA region. So that's already, so the human capital aiming to change is already there. And if we look at people aged between 0 and 30, this is about 60% of the total population. So the MENA region or the Arab region's population in general is a young population. So it's a population that aims or looks towards change. So what we need to do, or what we need to advocate for, is creating the enabling environment, because we saw that those people, while working with them on different projects, I saw that they have the potential. So we see a lot of engineers or professionals from Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, etc. When moving to the Gulf countries or to Europe, they are being one of the most well-positioned professionals. So Arab in general, or the region in general, needs only enabling environment and a good governance framework. So that's in brief what I am seeing in terms of youth involvement. So the potential is there, but we need further enabling environment and support.
Absolutely, very well said, Michael. Yeah, we find that enthusiasm with the young people, but like you mentioned, the enabling environment is still not very inclusive, not very concrete. It needs a lot of thought process to really make that streamlined. That actually brings my next question to Sarah. Sarah, you heard from Michael and also from Atra. They see there is a progress in what the youth movement or youth advocacy from research, from policy orientation, and also technically from job perspective, working in the green jobs. What exactly would drive young people to, into taking climate action as a profession? I mean, how do you think some of the driving factors for them, like Michael gave, the reason enabling environment should be provided. So what do you think, as a person who runs a part of a business community where a lot of initiatives in the region has been very progressive, if you look into numbers, they're quite staggering. So you as a person, how do you see that transition happening, and what is that driving the young people in the Arab region towards really taking climate actions on the ground?
That's a fantastic question, Nashad, because often when youth come and ask the question, how can we solve the climate action? How can we be part of the solution? I believe there are multiple avenues, and we need to understand these multiple avenues and their impact and contribution to climate action in the MENA region. First and foremost, non-state actors like civil society, private sector, media, and academia. I believe if you're not a public servant, there are multiple avenues where you can create your impact. When it comes to civil society, it's very admirable, honestly, what's happening in the North Africa, Levant region in terms of seeing youth working on establishing NGOs and environment, on sustainability, on conservation. And all of these NGOs require young talents to be part of that workforce that is able to push for more ambitious actions on the ground. In the GCC region, I see that it's substandard when it comes to civil society contribution to the overall climate conversation, but we're starting to it's better late than never, right? So we're starting to come and see more civil society organizations, NGOs, registered and unregistered, trying to form some sort of momentum and a movement within these countries. So civil society for sure is an avenue that could be utilized. Then the private sector. I believe every country in the MENA region is undergoing its own energy transition and transport transition. And this will open up a lot of green jobs opportunities. And it's being someone who works in the private sector, I believe it is a meaningful way, an impactful way to be part of the transition and to create the change and realize your climate aspirations through working through the private arm and creating the change that you want to see through creating actual projects on ground that has a real impact. Another area, which is media. Unfortunately, we have very low participation when it comes to the communication of climate action in Arabic, in English, about MENA, data, everything to that front. No enough coverage, no enough attention, no influencers to talk about climate. What is the Greta Thunberg of the Arab world? We don't have momentum and figures within the Arab world that we can say that they are climate action figures and utilizing and using media to communicate about climate. Michelle talked about the academia and maybe a little bit talked about research and development, and it's definitely an area where I believe youth today are ready for. We have a population very highly educated across the MENA region. Best education is happening in the region, and research and development could be a good segue from college into contributing into knowledge products that could understand and study and analyze where we are in terms of our vulnerability in the region. So this is where I feel the multiple avenues where youth today can contribute.
And excellently put, Sarah, like the three avenues, like the public sector, private sector, and the media. I mean, these are three great avenues where really the change should happen. And I think youth has a role in all of this. And my next question comes to that first one, the public sector youth role. That brings me back to Atra. You've been somebody working within the system to have the youth role, how you can develop and implement a very inclusive and ambitious climate policies in the region. And someone who is working for the government of UAE as a climate specialist. How do you think that sort of a youth prominent role would definitely help UAE, and that can be sort of an example set for other countries to follow the same pursuit? How do you see this sort of transition happening within the system?
So I think youth can pretty much do everything, right? So we can see young people as engineers, analysts, researchers, specialists in different fields of energy, water, health, and finance. So we better utilize that when needed. So having youth in those fields will not only influence the policy making, but rather they will be part of the government response to these challenges of climate change. And this is what we are seeking for. Again, as Sarah mentioned and Michelle as well, research and development is pretty much a big portion of the solution. So youth today, they have a clear vision of how they want their future to look like, and they are able to bring new perspectives regarding to the different climate-related issues. We have the capacity, we have the energy to lead those movements. So you will see youth either in the government sector, private sector, NGOs as well, actually leading new movements, new initiatives to bring new solutions on the table, because they understand, or we understand very well, that tomorrow is our future. And we need to ensure enabling all the essentials to have a better tomorrow.
Well, I wouldn't but agreed on that behalf from someone who has been working with the system in developing policies, and just emphasizing again the critical role of young people in private sector, public sector. And I will next jump to Michelle. Michelle, you have been working on the interface on the research, especially on the topic which is critical for a region on climate, water, and energy nexus. So How do you feel the critical role of young people in research and development? So as a consultant, as someone you are being in the research field, how do you see this critical role of young people from a research perspective? How do you see, how can we bring more people towards research and development, use their, also like you mentioned, young people in the region at the highest numbers. How can we channelize their huge activism energy towards something research and policy development, rather than, just people come for activism and they leave the space and they get busy with their personal life. So how do you actually channelize those energy towards something like what you have been working on, research, and what is those research we need? What are the big gaps in the region in terms of research as such? It's back to you.
Yes, thank you, Nishad. It's a very important question. So the interface between climate, water, energy, food, all those kinds of nexuses, because the climate issue is not separated, so we cannot tackle it as a separate issue, but it's more of a holistic approach that we need. So we need to look at the interface between climate, water, food, energy, etc., or even health. So if I were to talk about the climate water in particular, because it's mostly my field of work, so I'm basically a water engineer and the researcher in the water field. So climate comes as a part of my activism and my work in general. So it's not my main focus, but it's mainly affecting all the components of the water cycle, starting from rainfall to snow covers to groundwater recharge, etc. And talking about the role of youth in this particular domain, so recently UNESCO created what we named the Groundwater Youth Network. So it's a network focusing on groundwater and on a global scale, because UNESCO found that there are no youth-led organizations focusing on this very important resource that represents 97% or 97 to 99. So it's a debate of all.
I think we've lost Michelle again. So I will jump the next question to Sarah. I hope Michelle come back. Michelle, are you here?
Yeah, I'm back.
Yeah,
sorry
please,
again.
Proceed. No problem.
We're still trying to adapt to this technical issue. So I was saying that UNESCO created a groundwater use network, and working in this network. So I've been the chair of this network since March 2023, so a year and a few months already. So we saw that the Arab representation in this network is acceptable. We have like 13% of our members are from the Arab region. So we have around 150 volunteers only from the Arab region, which is a good number. But looking at the distribution, looking at the regional distribution of those members, we see that we have almost no members from the GCC region, unfortunately. And I would take this opportunity to request probably support from our other panelists who are from that region. So we see that most of the volunteers are from North Africa or the Levant region in particular. I'm not sure what this means, although groundwater is very important for the GCC countries. So they are almost totally dependent on groundwater as a water resource, and it's heavily affected. All the studies almost showed that it's heavily affected by climate change and even by climate projections. So we see that groundwater recharge is decreasing, although recharge itself there in that region is not very important due to the low amount of rainfall that is received. But also we know that 40% of the Arab population lives in the coastal zone, and this coastal zone is one of the most zones that are affected by climate change by several factors, starting by seawater intrusion. So if someone does not know what seawater intrusion is, it's the invasion of the seawater into the freshwater that is below the surface, what we call the freshwater aquifers. And this source is mainly the source of drinking water for those populations. So So that's one aspect. Also, the rising sea levels can contribute in the future to this, to exacerbating this issue of seawater intrusion, and many other aspects that we can talk about. So on the climate-water interface. So I'm just giving some examples. So this shows that Arab youth should be more engaged, especially in the GCC country. So we see in other regions of the Arab world, it's more or less acceptable. But again, so to build up on my previous answer, so although they are involved or very interested in contributing and in making the change, we see that in contrast to what we see, so where we have the highest number of volunteers, we have the lowest level of acceptance to their level of participation. So we did also a survey to ask those volunteers about their acceptance or the level of, that they see that they are involved in by their governments. And we saw that mostly in the regions where we have volunteers, they are not satisfied by the level of involvement in the public policies development of their countries. While in the UAE, for example, we see that, so probably Asra can talk more.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Michelle. That brings me to the next question to Atra and see, how do you see at the moment the region? Do you think young people have now a dedicated position in their national and regional climate efforts? Do you think they have now that power? We're all looking for, hey, we want to be in that decision-making chair with our leaders and stuff. You think, are we there, or at least comparing to our global North counterpart, I think we have made a quite good progress. That's my personal belief in terms of just from the street activism to the decision-making process, at least not decision-making, at least with the decision makers, to be frank. So do you think that that is getting very common in the region from Maghreb to Mashriq to, towards Levant also? Do you think that's happening?
Yeah, I believe that's happening and it's in the process. I mean, an example is Bonn Climate Conference that was held earlier this month. We have seen a lot of youth people and young people within the national delegation of the different parties from the MENA region. So they are not anymore sitting as observers to advocate or protest. They're actually, at least I will not say in the position where they're actually making decisions, but they're having more better communication with the decision makers, with the leaders, trying to understand, exchange some knowledge, and then pave their ways through the process to have the ability to influence the policies and decisions made upon their futures. One thing I want to add regarding to what Michelle have mentioned about they are linking some GCC participants as researchers in their network.
Except UAE.
Generally, the issue might be and that we have actually different networks in different countries. So youth, they do not know where to go to or where they should put their efforts in. And then that might be a reason of maybe we lack that connectivity between the different networks we do have in the different countries in the same region. So for instance, here in the UAE, a project I myself was working on with the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, we do have the Climate Change Research Network, where it's basically a platform established to build a bridge between researchers and governments. So to fill the gap, we're communicating with university students, urge them to have some research to advance the policy relevant in the ministry and other government ministries for impacts and adaptation to bring actionable solution so that the country could utilize that in the different sectors. So this is I'm really happy on how we're progressing with the network. But again, answering Michelle, maybe we need to think beyond how to have a specific network that would eventually serve, a separate or one country, but rather than that, we can connect all those networks to build a bridge between the different countries in the region. So I would be really happy talking further and discuss with Michel into looking and bringing more solutions.
Yeah, I mean, that brings me to the question also, Michelle. Some of the networks we've been known globally aren't very much accessible to our part of the region. I mean, that brings to my big next question. Moving beyond the super white global North activism, when it comes to a lot of such programs that you mentioned, are overwhelmed, taken care by youth in the European region or in the Latin American region. And our youth are not very much aware of those networks. Of course, we have our national networks, which are quite active, but our connections to these networks are not very established through whether it's the UN institutions or it is through any other think tank institutions. We had a limited access or networking in the past. I mean, now, like as I mentioned at some of the summits, young people are very aggressively networking beyond activism. Of course, they have a lot of friends in that circle, but now they're looking at some of the networks they want to join to really make sure that the region, their country is represented. This was not a scene a year back. Sarah might have been aware as a woman from Saudi. She have not seen young people from the region. I said myself for the last many years, I haven't seen many people from the region in any of the some of the fellowship programs, some of the UNESCO water program. We have been not aware of. So there is a lack of how this sort of things comes to our part of the world. I mean, like Michelle, like I mentioned, it is important that we connect within the region, and we don't have a dedicated regional institutions or where all youth can conclave and share their ideas, opportunities and stuff in terms of just not opportunities but also funding opportunities for organization, how young researchers can work together. Like the program which as I mentioned, UAE is most welcoming, but can we think about something very regional, like a GCC level youth researchers network, GCC, She4 climate groups. We know She4 climate global one, but how many are from our region? Even though our young women and young girls are highly educated from the best university in the world, they're still nationally engaged, which is quite important. But that sharing of ideas, which Michelle, how important is that in the research field? Sharing of ideas, sharing of good practices is critical in moving forward. So, Sarah, you've been somebody who been there. How do you see the such lack of opportunities for the youth from the region? Is it really because there is a small sort of a rift between the so-called global North youth movement and the global South movement?
So if we say it's a drift between the global North and global South, we'll be doing ourselves injustice, because we do acknowledge European youth are very united and African youth are very united. So what are we missing as MENA youth? So I often ask myself this question, and I believe we're still disaggregated. And the reason I believe we're disaggregated is that due to a lack of infrastructure and legal frameworks to allow us to work cross-country on a civil society level. So if there is no such infrastructure, it will be really difficult for us to be able to exchange best practices, have unification on messaging. What is the voice of MENA youth? What is the message that we want to do? We have different circumstances, different capabilities, different abilities, different unique circumstances. And until we ourselves understand our voice and what we want to do, then we will be able to have a unified message and demands of what we want to do as climate activists. In no way I'm saying that what we are doing right now is not powerful. It is very powerful, because each and every young movement that is happening within our respective countries are growing stronger. We're seeing younger generations that are coming that are naturally sustainable, naturally eco-friendly, and they speak this language. So it's just about now in the age of social media, they're able to connect But then how do we connect in a way that is still legal, still safe, it still allow us to operate cross country, allow us to produce different work together. There are some international organizations that are funding some projects in the region to either publish knowledge products or come up with policy recommendation papers, but it's merely work on paper. And what I would love to see, and what do we need today, is financing for youth-led climate implementation, not only on a country level, but on a regional level.
Very, very well said, Sarah. I bring that back to Michelle. Michelle, what do you think that do we need really a structured or a formalized way for youth to really implement such climate action projects, including the water energy nexus, which you have been working on, the climate water nexus, if you want to say. But do you think implementation is still an issue when you look into some of the studies you've been, obviously as a researcher, I believe, beg your pardon, are people with papers, and you celebrate getting your papers published. On the ground, do you think this sort of implementation is critical as a researcher also to look into how feasible those studies you've been done can be really implemented for the community? Do you think this needs a structured and formalized way, or do you think researchers are ahead of our system? And when you compare to youth in private or public research sector is far ahead, because they are one step ahead of us, at least doing a community-led implementation. I wouldn't say large scale.
Yes, thank you. What I found while working on research projects, that sometimes local people, so you have to go to the ground, as you mentioned. So this gap between ground and the desktop that we are sitting on is very large usually. So sometimes we end up with results that are not, that have nothing to do with the ground. So once you go and you talk with the people that live in the areas that you are studying, you discover that it's totally different. So it's very important to forget about the desktop for a few hours and to go to the ground. So even if we talk about climate change, so the people who are the most affected by climate change are the vulnerable people, like the small farmers, people living in remote rural areas. Those are the people who are the ones that we need to hear talking, not me, for example. So I consider myself privileged. Like I live in a house. I have the privilege to study, etc. But we have to give the chance to those people. So in international conferences, for example, in March 2023, I was in the UN Water Conference in New York, and I made an intervention to tell those people that organizing the conference that you forgot about the most important element of this conference. So you invited ministers, you invited me as an activist, you invited researchers, university professors, etc. But you forgot about the most important one when we talk about climate change impacts on water, for example, or water pollution, or etc. Like we forgot this small farmer that no one is talking about, so except me or a few other activists. So we need to bring on the table those people who are left behind. So if we are aiming to implement Agenda 2030 of leaving no one behind, so we have to consider everyone. And if we look at the progress we are making, for example, on SDG 6 related to water, we see that now we're in 2023, and in order to achieve the targets set for 2030, we need to be working 4 times faster than what we did in the last 10 years. And I don't expect, honestly, that we will be doing this huge progress from now until 2030. So we will end up not achieving targets, in particular for SDG 6. So yeah, to answer your question in brief, so what I mentioned before, we need an enabling environment, we need aware decision makers on all levels, not only locally. So sometimes we talk about local decision makers, our decision makers in our countries, but also on the international level. We need a huge change in the mindset. We need young people to be in the power. So, for example, people like us here in this panel, this kind of people who are very aware about all the levels of complications that climate change and its related nexuses are about. So those kind of, we are seeing some shift in some countries, as I mentioned, UAE, for example. So there is a positive shift in terms of awareness on the level of high level decision making processes, and we need this to be implemented in other countries also. So,
very, very well said, Michelle. I mean, I really get the point, like where you work aloud for, not only just you representing them, but the people on the ground are far missing from all this high level discussion. But it's also important that a person like you bring their perspective on the table. That's the difference of, being a representative of your community or your region or country. So I think you did a great job. And this is also something we should always remember, that we are the representative of the community and we are talking on their behalf, or not just ourselves. So you very critically mentioned that part. So I will now just turn back to Sarah. Sarah, there has been great progress, and you have been seen from years now in the region. What do you think the whole climate movement, from research, from a policy, from a public sector, from private sector, from research, will go from here? I mean, let's put by COP28, what do you want to see within the youth community?
Well, I think we are strategically positioned today as young MENA climate activists. We had a COP in Sharm el-Sheikh, where I believe that we've seen for the first time young activists from GCC region, from Levant, from North Africa coming for the first time and being able to participate, which I believe it was a triumph for us. I am looking forward COP28, where this relationships that we were able to build, that we capitalize on it, and we become able to build stronger ties, unify our vision of what we want for our region. As Atra said when she started the conversations, we're a vulnerable region. If anyone today that is attending come to Riyadh or Dubai or Doha would understand the tremendous heat that we are under today because of the climate change, and we recognize it's a climate change issue and it will only get worse. So just having COP28 as an avenue for action is what I'm looking for, and what I believe that the UAE will be able to deliver to us.
Yeah, this brings back to the COP28 presidency question to Atra. Atra, we have seen the COP presidency through Her Highness Sheikh Shema has been very vocal about the role of young people. I mean, not just for UAE, but for regional and global young people. Do you think the COP28 would be a historic place? I mean, I don't think any soon we will have a COP in the region. Like Sarah mentioned, COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh was a first ever convened place for, at least for our history in the last couple of COPs, where we saw at least one activist or advocate or researcher from all the Arab countries were present. And we expect this happen in COP28. We also have a funding program by the COP presidency. Do you think, for my question to you will be, will this continue from COP28 to COP29?
Well, I mean, the UAE presidency are already working very hard to ensure that this COP is an inclusive COP that's going to have youth, children, women, and indigenous people as well. So we have seen, like, in Bonn again, the first youth stock take happening and taking place. That's also paving the way on how we want to look, how we want to see the different members of the society are participating in COP28 and beyond COP28. We don't want to have a large number of youth participating at COP28, and then they are just forgotten, or they forget about climate activism or being part of the solution. But we rather want to have or leave a legacy behind COP28 of how important youth are and building all those solutions. We need to build the capacities, transfer their knowledge. So like one fact I would drop is the UAE delegation consists of 60%. 60% of the UAE youth UAE delegation are youth, and it has been since COP27, and inshallah will continue even beyond COP28 to COP29 and beyond. So yeah, inshallah, we'll see a lot of movements toward keeping youth involved and part of the process for bringing climate-related solutions to tackle all the sides, all the sectors related to climate change, and bring meaningful engagement to the policymaking table.
Yeah, I was jumping in between just to say, not only the youth component within the UAE is an explanatory example how many countries in the region can replicate, but also the women role, how young women are also very much part. I mean, if you look at the scenario, I mean, maybe Michelle also in terms of research, I don't know how many are from that sector if you divide the gender. I mean, for me, at least from my perspective, women are far more empowered in the region in terms of activism, advocacy, research, policy level engagement, not just sit a desktop job and go back home, rather very proactively involved in many of the decision-making discussions beyond their day-to-day life. Do you think, Athro, that's something going to be common, or do you think there is a gender imbalance?
Or actually, we have a lot of reason for that. I think studies have shown that women percentage in the region are higher than men, definitely, and then women are actually hardworking people, and they usually women are really hardworking. They're educating themselves. They want to make a change, so they naturally have this powerful.
Very well said. I mean, Sarah is smiling, so that's a thumbs up for what you guys have been doing. So, Michael, Michelle, or Michael, I always confuse the names. So, Michelle, do you think there is a lack of very unique researchers from our region working with our counterparts in the global north, like in the Europe and the US, on a specific topics that are very critical in terms of climate impacts for the region? Like the water is one of the critical things. Food security is another huge challenge for the region. And of course, temperature is going to rise as ever than before. So smart cooling systems. Do you think we lack some research area, especially young people like striving, like, hey, I want to work specifically on this research because my region needs it, my country needs it. Somebody who has been in the research field, you go. It's a water climate, it's your expertise, but obviously you've been interacting with other experts and scientists from the region. Do you think there is a lack of real youth involvement in the research and research activities?
Actually, in terms of research, so whenever I was working on several projects in Arab regions, so whenever I needed a certain aspect on a certain study area, for example, and I searched in the literature, most of the times I was able to find a previous study done by a certain researcher, a published paper, etc. So this gave me the impression that research in our region is very active and on different levels. So it gave me an impression, so it might be a very subjective one, but I feel that in terms of research output, we are doing okay, but the problem is mostly between research and policy. So the gap between research and policy. Once I was attending, for example, a workshop with a researcher presenting her work on climate change impacts in my country, and we had representatives from the ministry. And the ministry was surprised that this study is already existing and it was done. So this is a very clear example of the gap that exists in many countries, not only in my country. So the problem is mostly the gap between research and policy. And in terms of researchers, we see that many researchers from the global north are doing, or from Europe, from the US, are doing research in our region and about topics in our region. And this also led me to ask myself, why don't we do research in their areas? And I started doing that also. So also we shouldn't rely on foreign researchers or professionals working in our region. We should empower ourselves and we should show our decision makers. So we see also in many countries, experts are brought from outside, from abroad, and they are paid 5 or 10 times more than the local experts. So we should believe in ourselves, and we should if we became one day decision makers, you, Asra, Sarah, Muhammad, or anyone, we should be aware or be always reminded that once in the time we were those young experts and we were looking for opportunities. We were seeing our friends asking us to help them to reach some positions. So we should be always ready to give the opportunity to others.
Michelle, you brought a critical point when it comes to research. I bet when you research, there were research done in the past, but out of the 10, 9 are Global North scientists or researcher from the Global North. Not because we don't have good researchers, but mostly that goes to the funding aspects. So most of the funding from the Global North or international institutions always goes to them, feeling they are more credible than our people from our region. So do you feel as a young researcher, there is this divide existed? Now, Michelle submitted a proposal along with another entity from Global North to the Ministry of Local think tank for a project. Do you think there is disparities? Okay, Michelle will never win it because he's submitting a proposal in his own country, while his country likes the people from the West. Do you feel this exists in a very broader way, or it's just a matter of time before this changes over? Michelle, it was for you.
Yeah, I thought it was for Asra, sorry, because she's also. Yeah, sometimes like the funding is a very crucial point in terms of putting the requirements or the profiles of the researcher or scientist needed for a project. But in my case, so it was the opposite. So I'm also in a subjective position to comment about that, because the project that I'm working on as a researcher, it was required that the researcher should be from the global south or from a developing country. So I'm in the opposite case and this time. But usually, yeah, I see that sometimes foreign universities having the funding or leading the project, they prefer students from Europe, for example. So that's also obvious in many instances.
Yeah, I mean, that's critical, like you mentioned. Obviously, next time any project comes in, making sure that the local researchers are part of the research, definitely know the ecosystem where they're working in. Obviously, we need funding from the Global North and institutions that can support, which is very important. But like you mentioned, having you, I mean, you rightly said that's the right way moving forward. Sarah, I'm coming back to you on the funding aspects, from research to more on a youth-led solution activism or youth-led solution startup, or some youth-led entrepreneurs in the region are not quite doing great. Why is the funding lacking to our young people against, my personal experience I'm sharing, to just an advocacy groups in the North, Global North, receives millions for advocacy, where an entrepreneur with an idea of water harvesting system in Yemen don't receive a single penny?
Well, I think, in my opinion, the issue is that sometimes, often the funders and the donors paintbrush the MENA region as a one region with one misconception of the fact that the region has wealth and resources, thus doesn't require and doesn't need support. While, as I have already mentioned, there is some really serious political, socioeconomic constraints in the region that doesn't set youth as a priority to policymakers. Then youth are left alone to come up with their startups and trying to fund themselves and crowdsource for their projects, to create their own social initiatives, and having to maneuver really difficult systems to try to create the impact that they're looking for. And I think for a long while, probably we don't have, again, the proper communication and the proper messaging of what kind of talents that we have in the region. I meet with a lot of amazing youth from different parts of the region with great startups, great applications, where you can plant your trees from, press of a button in your phone, where you can work on carbon accounting, and how can you trade different carbon credits in a very smart and innovative way. But usually not well positioned and not given the platform to speak about. I think it is our responsibility, and this forum and other forums will allow us to speak about the uniqueness of the region's youth and their capabilities and their innovations, and allow us again in COP28 to convey that message and ensure that there are mechanisms set forth by international organizations, by UN agencies, by different donors and funders to allocate resources specifically for MENA region youth. Acknowledging their vulnerability, acknowledging their needs, and allowing them to thrive just inclusively and equally to all other youth in the world.
Very well said. I would agree more than that, Sarah. I'll jump into keeping in mind the time constraints also. After my question would be a lot of sort of a statement or a closing sort of statement, if at all we have a follow-up on that, is what do you expect COP28 to deliver in terms of youth, especially in policy-oriented work? And how do you think that will prosper and help the regional youths to more and more involved in policy?
So I believe, as I said earlier, youth COP28, inshallah, will be inclusive, and it will include youth and in the process and the leading positions and roles, either related to the COP itself or climate activism generally. I want to add up on what Sarah was saying about fostering climate innovation and activism through entrepreneurship in the whole MENA region. And inshallah, we're hopefully gonna see more and more solution on that to promote the ideas and thoughts that youth are bringing up on the table, development and technology that essentially need some financial flow and institutional frameworks to enable those kind of solutions to take place for to increase climate resilience in the MENA region and bring up more and more green jobs within Allah. So a lot of hopes for COP28, and inshallah we're gonna see what we are looking for and seeking for, and even more.
Well, thanks, Etra, for those valuable insight and hopefulness you want to see. I then move to Michelle. As a researcher, COP28 as such in the region would be historic. Do you think, as a researcher, you think this is a space to capitalize on having more discussion around having young people in the research field, like else in policy or in advocacy? What are your takeaways, or what do you expect to sort of have a discussion around this at COP, especially on youth's role in climate research?
Yes, so since it will be organized in the UAE, so I'm a bit optimistic in terms of youth involvement and the output, like the requirements that might be probably put by the organizers on the national delegations on the youth involvement. Can you still hear me? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So I was saying that I'm a bit optimistic regarding COP28. But we should also keep in mind that some Arab countries, I'm not going to provide names, but they put some restrictions on their activists. So I have many friends from different countries who are very controlled or very they have their freedom not fully achieved on social media or in person events. So we should also keep this in mind, that although, for example, I'm enjoying freedom in terms of activism where I'm living and in my home country, etc., but this is not the case for everyone. So we should also keep this in mind with different political situations in multiple countries, the heterogeneity in terms of political systems that we respect for sure, but they are not always welcoming the activism in terms of climate or in terms of gender equality or other types of activism. So this is something that probably the organizers of the different COPs or international events should keep in mind, for example, by providing online possibility of joining online, making it fully hybrid, etc., because some people are not given permissions to leave their countries to attend such events, or even some host countries do not give visas to other countries, and that was the case also by the United States of America. Also, the Middle East Institute is based in Washington, but I have to say that the USA didn't provide visas for many African climate and water leaders to attend the UN Water Conference that was held in March 2023. So that's one of the examples, and I can provide several other examples in terms of barriers for youth to be heard and to be more involved in terms of policy and also in terms of research, because many other countries also do not provide visas for researchers to attend. And I have also plenty of examples that can provide, but I'm not going to provide names to avoid any political issues now.
No.
So I'll just keep it like this by stating this very important
Absolutely.
issue.
Very much, Michelle. I very much agree on that. I mean, this was one of the things young people actually were protesting at the Bonn SPA meeting. After I can see that we talk about inclusiveness of young people, how collectively we are working for climate, and people don't get access to visa to certain countries. We don't have to name either it's from the global south or global north, rich or poor. They always talks about freedom and youth access, and the same country don't let you go there for many of their political reasons or whatever it is. But the same people who campaigns for this stuff are one of the main limiters of this at the same. So it is not restricted to one or two countries, or the biggest campaigner of democracy also have this issue. So, we cannot, pinpoint one or the other country, but this is one of the key issues. Yes, Sarah. On that, you can also.
I just want to add, I believe it's unjustified fear, tokenism of youth, the treatment of youth as uncertain individuals with unclear agenda, and this is faced in the MENA region and internationally. So I think the message is, if we want youth activism to be meaningful and to be true and to create the impact that we all wanted to create, we need to be mindful to ensure to remove that barriers. And we've seen it at the COPs, at Bonn, and again, and different other forums. Yeah.
So Michelle, you're really right. As Sarah also mentioned, it's not just the visa. Also, the visa fees are not exempted. And sometimes it's very huge money for a lot of young people from global north against global south, because they really don't get those funding supported to travel to such summit. That's why one of my question is moving beyond white activism, because again, when Sarah or Atra mentioned the amount of young people at Egypt was good. When I said at least one from a region, we are 10 from one European country. So this is not a great balance. Again, coming with the fact that our region is one of the country which has a huge impact of climate change, and then our young people's voices are not heard. So Michelle, I really agree to what you have been mentioned, and this is a critical issue, and the young people are voicing for it. And I think you should also keep voicing. I mean, you don't have to name or shame any country, but it is happening with many countries you pointed. So I think with that, I think we come to an end to this wonderful session, but I will not let you go as easily. I will have one sentence statement from all of you three on what are your expectations from COP28. Just one sentence, Sarah, Atra, and Michelle. And then I leave back to our host of the event, Mr. Mohammed Mahmoud. Sarah.
Right,
okay, Atra, you can begin. No issues.
Thank you. Building on what just Michelle was talking about, I would say it's time now to act the act rather than just talking the talk. And this is what we want to see in youth activism.
Sarah.
I think now we need to galvanize on a community of practice of young climate activists in the MENA region to create a new way of thinking on how do we look at our environmental conditions, our challenges, and unlock the potential of the youth of the region.
Very well said, Sarah. Michelle,
as Sarah and Asra mentioned, so I have nothing to add, but I will say that I'm optimistic again towards this COP28, and I look forward for it to be a milestone in terms of integrating climate policies with other policies like the water, food, energy, and health, etc. So I look into it as a positive and a potential milestone of having a turn towards a more integrated approach of addressing climate change.
Thank you so much, Michelle, Atra, and Sarah. I wouldn't have asked for better panelists. Thank you, Mohammed, for getting them on board and having a great discussion. I'm so happy to hear your insight ahead of COP and what are you up to and what are your aspirations from the region, from water diversity, from research, from within the system, from public sector, and also from private sector. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Mohammed, for having us here today. Back to you, Mohammed.
Thank you all so very much. What a great panel. I can't say I'm surprised because it was intentional gathering all of you specifically, and that showed in the conversation you had. So I really appreciate your participation. I also appreciate in your discussion really being honest about the challenges the region is facing and not really having an unvarnished conversation about the obstacles, but also illustrating that the future is bright. And when it comes to this issue of the global north versus the global south, you know, the MENA region is one of the big voices in the global south and has the potential, and I'd say beyond the potential, is showing can be an action leader in terms of addressing the climate. And on a personal note, I'm just very, very proud of all of you. I mean, you make me feel so very humble. All of you are excellent ambassadors from the region. In terms of your efforts and your accomplishments and your work. And not just as youth, but you mentioned it, but I also want to know just women. We are very progressive as a region in terms of the efforts that women are doing and putting forth another great representation for our region. So I'm filled with pride and gratitude that you all are sort of leading the face, or the face leading the representation of our region to take on the challenge of the future moving forward, and those behind you. I like the comment of mentorship. You know, it's not just moving forward, but lending a hand back to bring someone else with us, because it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a coalition, and so I really, really appreciate that. So thank you, Nishad, Saada, Michelle. I really appreciate your time. For those of you that are on, this has been recorded, and we'll be posting immediately as soon as we're done. On YouTube, MEI's YouTube website, as well as the MEI website itself where the event is posted. So feel free to share it with others. I know our audience is international, so not everyone can necessarily view it live. In fact, we get a lot more viewership after the fact of our recorded sessions. So absolutely feel free to share that. I will take a moment just to plug our next event, which is tomorrow. And the theme will be on two things that we don't traditionally put together, but I think has gotten more focus, which is the climate and security nexus. And so this is looking at how climate is affecting both physical security and then issues of human migration, security of food security, water resources, energy security at a broader level. Of course, we've had panels or are going to have panels to specifically look at aspects of the food, water, energy nexus. But tomorrow, feel free to tune in, same time, 10 a.m. Eastern, Washington, D.C. time, whatever that translates to your local time. We have an international audience, as I said. Do tune in. So thank you all very much, and hopefully we'll see you all